Okay, Matthew, this is going to be the last one, isn't it? I think I have a problem. Hi guys, Matthew here and welcome back again to my channel. After checking out Gigabyte's more mainstream model of their RX 5700 XT graphics card, the one coming from their gaming series, I will put a link to that review in the right top corner of this video. Today I will be taking a look at its more beefed up brother, which took a little bit longer to come out, the Aorus RX 5700 XT. So what's exactly different compared to that also Gigabyte's gaming OC model which I tried recently? Well, in terms of how it looks, not that much. The color scheme is a little bit darker, we have less silver accents around the card, with the Aorus logo on one of the fans, in the middle of it all, but it still kinda looks skinny on account of the pretty shallow shroud that slightly covers only the top part of it and some on the sides, although practically speaking that's a good thing as the warm air can more easily escape. Overall, I do like its design, even more like this compared to the gaming series, it looks more stealthier, Batman-like. With this model you will get even more RGB LED lighting around the card, a few stripes are now arranged around the fans, while we still have an RGB LED lit logo on the side of the card, but this time it's the Aorus sign instead of Gigabyte's, and another small and very subtle display like fan stop sign on the back end of the card. Turning it onto the other side, we have a very clean and simple looking backplate with some engraved lions and Aorus logo that covers the whole back surface of the PCB and serves as a heat spreader, as behind it we have thermal pads which pull the heat off of the components. Back here you can also notice that we have this little sign and it actually points out to the BIOS switch right next to it, and the fact that this model carries two BIOS profiles, one with the silent and the other one with the OC BIOS profile, that being the default one so to speak. For this purpose I will only be using the default one, as there's no real reason for me to use the other one as the card is pretty quiet to begin with. The video output layout carries a non-standard number of ports. You'll get a total of 6 of them, 3 HDMIs and 3 display ports, and yes, you can utilize all of them at the same time for up to 6 displays. Looking at it like that from the side, it's definitely one of the thicker graphics cards that I've tried, taking up well above 2 slots in height. Ironically, despite of that, its weight is not that high, as it's around 200 grams lighter than the Gaming X model from MSI. The cooling solution which it carries beneath that plastic shroud is a bit beefier. We have a 2-part aluminum heatsink through which travels 6 6mm copper heat pipes, and a part of them is formed in a way that they make a direct contact plate for the GPU. Around that you will find a couple of cold plates which also carry thermal pad solutions, and they are here to pull off the heat from the GDDR6 video memory and the 7-phase power design. All of this is cooled up with a 80mm triple fan solution, where the middle one is spinning in the opposite direction than the other two in order to get a better airflow between the fans, before all reducing the turbulence. The fans of course do not spin when the graphics card is not under load, which is why we have that fan stop sign that I mentioned earlier, and like that its cooling solution is able to cool off the GPU in this passive state to about 54 degrees Celsius on an open test bed, which is pretty on par with their gaming series. Putting the card under load, the GPU temperature was mostly roaming around 70 degrees Celsius. I saw it stretching to 73 degrees Celsius at most, but usually around 71 or 72 degrees Celsius. It stayed there pretty much all the time, no matter the load, and the reason why is that is because the fans are constantly moving in RPM in order to maintain that preset value. The GPU junction hotspot temperature and the video memory temperature were pretty much in sync, around 90 degrees Celsius mark for the most part, moving a few degrees up or down, which is for the video memory a bit on the higher side for what I saw with the RX 5700 XT series, while the VRM temperature was mostly below the 80 degrees Celsius mark. Having a 3-fan setup, this model is expected to be a bit louder than others, but it actually wasn't that bad. It was even a bit quieter than the gaming OC model, usually spinning between 1100 and 1800 RPM. And that's sort of my problem with it. It has a pretty wide range of fan speeds at which it operates, and in this case it also moves around a lot, frantically might I add, as you can see by this fan speed log. Sometimes it would spike to well over 2000 RPM for a brief moment, or it would unnecessarily start with 1800 RPM from the get-go and then slowly taper off, and then rise up again, and then taper off again, and then rise up again, and then taper off again. You get the picture. That said, I really hope that Gigabyte will, with the future firmware updates of this model, make its default fan speed curve a bit more forgiving, with a before all focus on finding its RPM sweet spot. Here's a short sound clip of the card under stock load, while also showing you the sound meter for a measurement comparison. As for the setup which I used here to test out this particular GPU, my choice of the core components is pretty standard. We have Intel's 6-core Core i5-8600K CPU overclocked to 5.1 GHz and paired with 2x8 GB of 3000 MHz DDR4 RAM. Other than that, if you have any questions or concerns about this model, feel free to leave me your comment down below and I will do my best to help you out. And now, let's check out the performance of this card. Jumping over to the results, there was no surprises here as everyone is pretty much familiar with the general performance output of the RX 5700 XT series. It handles gaming at 1080p and 1440p resolution without any problems, so I won't go too deep into it as you can take a look at all of the figures in these tables. I've also added a third set of gaming results based on the testing that I did with the 4K resolution. Despite basically maxing all the graphics settings in each game, the RX 5700 XT was still able to push through the 4K resolution. Of course, depending on the game, you would get anywhere from 30 FPS onward, which is more than playable. The card's stock GPU core clock frequency was roaming anywhere from 1950 to 2040 MHz for the most part, depending on the game and benchmark, which is pretty high, and the main reason why is that is because this one comes with a pretty hefty factory overclock on the GPU core clock, and that in general is what Gigabyte's Aorus series is known for. Taking it a bit further with some manual overclocking, I've managed to push it just a tad more, which resulted in 2050 to 2100 MHz of GPU core clock frequency, so not that much higher compared to the stock, but I did max out the video memory speed and also lower down the GPU voltage, since I didn't see any benefits with pushing it higher or keeping it at the stock levels. With that, the temperatures dropped down by just a bit, while the fans were having a little bit more calmer temper. The performance jump in that case was pretty modest. I was seeing around 3 to 5% of gain in numbers. Coming down to the power consumption of the card, Gigabyte once again showed that it likes to pull a little bit more than others, where I now saw around 290 watts of power consumption difference between the system idling and load of only the graphics card using the Firmark GPU stress test. They actually put a second 8-pin PCI Express power connector, so you have a total of two 8-pin PCI Express power connectors, because with having a 6-pin for the second PCI Express power connector, they would be right on the edge of what it can provide, but this way, besides having more power on your disposal, you will also have somewhere to plug in those dangling 2 pins. As for their software utility, well, they really need to work on it if you ask me. They were going in a good direction at one point, and then they decided to do things like separate the RGB LED control, so you have to use another application, their RGB Fusion, in order to get control for the lighting effects and colors on the card. Besides that, their main application, the Aorus engine, was not that useful to me in terms of the overclocking. It misses out on some settings, so I had to reach out for my usual go-to choice when it comes to that, MSI's Afterburner. With all that said, please Gigabyte make just one software utility, possibly for all of your hardware that needs or can be controlled, even products like peripherals, some kind of a universal central hub, which would have all of the things and settings at one place and would get regular updates. The Aorus version of the RX 5700 XT from Gigabyte is an overall even better product in comparison to their gaming series, but truth to be told, it should be, as that's to be expected since it would be a bare minimum considering the price premium that it has over it. It's definitely one of the top contender out there, although I'm personally still leaning more towards the Gaming X series just because it's a bit quieter than it, and I'm all about the noise, or better yet, the lack of it, but other than that, you cannot go wrong with choosing the Aorus model. That's it for this time from me. Thank you once again for watching. Please take a second to toss me a thumbs up if you enjoyed my content. That really helps a lot. And if you like what you saw, feel free to subscribe. And if you already are, be sure to press that notification bell down below so you don't miss out on a new video. And until then, catch you later, guys.